So our first presenter and winner of the OFAH Toronto Sportsman Show OFAH Zone H Fisheries Research Grant is Jacob Brownscombe from Carleton University. Please welcome Jacob to the stage. There should be a clicker here if you need to.
Thank you. So my name is Jacob Brownscombe. I'm a PhD candidate at Carleton University, where I work with Dr. Stephen Cook. I'm also a Bonefish and Tarpon Trust research associate. So what I'm going to talk today about is some research I'm doing this summer, looking at determining an effective recovery method for angled fish. So a little bit of background. Catch and release fishing is growing in popularity really rapidly, both due to conservation ethics of anglers, people who want to let their fish go and see them just let them swim another day, as well as due to management regulations, closed seasons and slot sizes. And we're releasing a really large proportion of our fish in Canada these days. Nationwide, we're actually releasing over 60% of the fish that we catch, and that amounts to over 100 million fish every year that we release. And we're doing this under the assumption that the fish that we release are going to survive and have limited fitness consequences. And by fitness consequences, I mean they can continue to grow and reproduce and contribute to the population the same way they would had we not angled them. However, we know that that's not always the case, because angling can be stressful for fish. It involves things like air exposure, hooking injuries. And we know that fish survival depends largely on angler behavior and that interaction with environmental conditions. And so for that reason, we've done a lot of research trying to develop best angling practices. And we've done a pretty good job of generating some general guidelines. We know that like minimizing or avoiding air exposure, using certain lure and hook types like circle hooks or barbless hooks, or being extra cautious around high water temperatures are very important things for fish welfare and survival. And of course, best angling practices, given how many fish we're releasing, are a very important part of the conservation of sport fish and natural resources in general. We also know that despite our best efforts, sometimes fish get stressed. I'm sure every angler in this room has had situations where you've had a fish, where you go to release it and it doesn't swim away right away. It's behaviorally impaired. It may even be upside down. It's not able to maintain its orientation. And when this happens, anglers, we often use recovery or revival techniques where we tend to hold the fish upward by hand and move them through the water in various maneuvers. And we do this because we think that we're helping the fish out, but in fact, there's never been any scientific studies that have shown whether or not this is beneficial or what the best strategy would be for recovering a fish. So that's exactly what my research questions are. Are revival techniques effective at reducing stress and improving survival in angled fish? And if so, what is the most effective technique? So this summer I'm going to do a project at Queen's University Biological Station. It's a great spot to do research. It's located on Lake Appinicon in the Rideau River system between Ottawa and Kingston. And I'm going to focus on two species to start, a largemouth bass and northern pike. They're both very, very common for catch and release in Ontario and good models to start with. So we're going to go fishing this summer, catch both these species, and those that don't swim away, those that are belly up or behaviorally impaired and don't leave right away, we're going to separate them out into three different treatments. We'll have figure eight recovery, and so where we hold the fish upright in posture and move them through the water in a figure eight pattern, so that there's water constantly entering their mouth and going over their gills. They're always moving forward. We're also going to try a back and forth recovery strategy where we push the fish forward and move them backward, push the fish forward. And these are both strategies that are recommended by different management agencies or different fishing organizations in Canada and around the world. And we're going to compare that to controls where we just simply leave them in the water, don't touch them, and let them do their own thing. So in order to actually assess how effective these recovery tactics are, we're going to have a few different metrics that we're going to characterize. One being behavioral, simply the time until they recover, they swim away and they're upright and happy on their own. We're also going to take half of the fish and monitor their survival for 48 hours, where we're going to hold them in floating mesh pens in the lake and check on them periodically to see how many survive. And lastly, we're going to do some physiological stress work on fish. So when fish get stressed, just like we do as people, there are some characteristic changes that happen to their physiology. You see increases in blood glucose levels, so blood sugar goes up when you get stressed. You see accumulations of lactic acid due to the anaerobic exercise happening in your muscles. That ends up in the bloodstream. And decreases in pH as you start to run low on oxygen and CO2 builds up in their systems. And so we're going to draw a very small amount of blood from half of these fish an hour after they're recovered, and compare these stress metrics between the different treatments. And we can analyze them right away using on-site blood analysis meters, just like the glucose meters that diabetics use. So I expect that the figure eight tactic will be the most effective, just based on the way that fish gills function. We know that they're built to uptake oxygen from water flowing in the mouth and out the back of the gills, and not the other way around. And so for that reason, I expect the back and forth technique to be potentially detrimental and possibly worse for the fish than the controls are. So in terms of the importance of this research for the OFAH, I think determining the most effective recovery strategy for fish is something that every angler could use in the OFAH, in Ontario, and worldwide. And ultimately, this should lead to greater survival of fish and lower impacts of fishing on fish populations, which will result in turn in enhanced fishing opportunities, responsible participation in fishing in Ontario, and overall conservation of Ontario's fish resources. And these are all three components of the OFAH's mission. So with that's my project. Thanks so much to the OFAH and Zone H for supporting this and the Toronto Sportsmen Show. And thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Jacob, for sharing your research with us. The Toronto Sportsmen Show and the OFAH have teamed up on a long list of initiatives over the years, particularly when it comes to youth and conservation education. You saw that last night with Walter Oster helping to present our Fleming College, Mike Reeder, OFAH, Toronto Sportsmen Show, scholarship. I hope I got them all. And so this year, the OFAH Zone H has joined the Toronto Sportsmen Show as a co-sponsor of the Fisheries Research Grant. Unfortunately, Walter wasn't able to stay with us to help present this, but I'd call on Wayne Forgrave of OFAH Zone H to join us up here to present the award to Jacob. Or not. Wally?
Don't bite.
Yeah. Yeah. Just want to just